Sometime in the early evening of June 7th, 2000, a 7-year-old boy named Robbie Romero headed off in his blue jeans, white t-shirt, and Pokemon shoes to play video games at a friend's house and was never seen again. The lack of evidence surrounding that night, coupled with questionable police actions, has left more questions than answers for the Romero family, even after 19 years. The suspicions of officers and accusations by family members are disturbing and cryptic. We are about to explore what little evidence we can surrounding Robbie's disappearance. So, if this isn't your cup of tea, thank you kindly for your support, but please click off this video now. As for the rest of us, let's dive in to the timeline to see if we can find out what happened to Robbie Romero. In no way is this investigative piece meant to accuse, absolve, nor exclude the involvement of anyone. I made every possible attempt to remain as objective as I could. I gathered information from print newspaper articles and other public information such as court records and reports. Any opinions expressed herein do not reflect my views or opinions. The only side I'm on is Robbie's. Robbie's disappearance has faded into history, but on this, the 19th anniversary, I hope to bring his face into your consciousness in the hope that someone, somewhere, somehow, has any information on what happened to Robbie Romero. From newspaper accounts, court documents, and police statements, I was able to gather that Evelyn, Robbie's mother, definitely talked to Robbie that evening around 7 p.m. He had called to ask her if he could go swimming, but told it was too late, Robbie decided instead to walk to a friend's house. This time of year in Santa Fe, New Mexico is beautiful, and dusk usually doesn't arrive until closer to 8:30 p.m. Since the friend's house was mere blocks away in the same Beloma subdivision, Robbie should have made it there before dark. But after a relative allegedly saw him walking in the arroyo, he was never seen again. The hours between 7 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. are some of the most mysterious in this case, and they unfortunately remain completely unknown, at least to non-police officials. At 11:30 p.m., Evelyn, who they say had been looking for Robbie on her own, flagged down Officer Valerio outside of her Balama home and informed him that Robbie was missing. While not new to police work, Valerio was new to the Santa Fe Police Department, a detail that will become important in a bit. The highest-ranking officer on duty that evening was Lieutenant Archuleta. This means, according to the SFPD, that Archuleta was responsible for not only informing his own superiors about the missing child, but he should have begun organizing resources and manpower to begin the search for Robbie. However, Archuleta, to this day, maintains that he initially believed he was dealing with a runaway, and that the circumstances of this missing child were of no big importance. While the initial officer, Officer Valerio, searched alone, in the dark, for Robbie, the rest of the police department was oblivious that there was a missing 7-year-old boy. Finally, at 4:30 a.m. on June 8, 2000, approximately 9 hours after Robbie was last seen, Officer Valerio delivered the report of his search to Archuleta. Unfortunately, however, Archuleta refused to send officers out on foot to question the neighborhood and declined to alert the media, again insisting that a runaway child was not worthy of alerting the mostly sleeping city. In the days following the 7th, The entire city was finally on alert, looking for Robbie. Cars passing through the Belmont neighborhood were stopped. Officers questioned drivers, and cars were searched. A helicopter was dispatched to do a low-flying search of the surrounding neighborhood and arroyos. Community volunteers formed huge search parties, and, as expected, Robbie's entire family was part of the search, except for Ronnie. Ronnie was Robbie's older brother, 22 years old at the time, and is actually one of the most important persons of interest surrounding Robbie's disappearance. Although no one was ever charged with nor arrested for Robbie's disappearance, Ronnie, till the day he passed in 2008, remained the prime person police were interested in. People that knew or worked with Ronnie remember that he was a pretty cool guy, but a little weird. Weird. That word seems to be the perfect one to describe Ronnie's behavior. He didn't participate in the initial searches for his brother. Even knowing he was a regular drug user, police seemed to find it important to note over and over again that Ronnie had something to hide. A week after Robbie disappeared on June 14, 2000, the FBI began excavating the Romero backyard. The following day, June 15th, Ronnie was arrested on assault and battery charges against family members in an unrelated incident. A further 2 days later, June 17th, a still unnamed woman called 911 to report that Ronnie had confessed to killing his brother. Her boyfriend was an associate of Ronnie's and claimed he showed up at her residence and for some reason opened up and shared details of what he had done. Ronnie told her he hid him in a place we would never find him. He claimed, "The police are way off. I hid him well." Not much information was given to the public again until July 13th, when police and FBI began searching the local landfill for Robbie's body. They had begun treating Robbie's disappearance as a homicide. Despite speaking to a person of interest that might have taken Robbie as alleged retaliation due to an unrelated case involving Ronnie, speaking to any and every lead, and questioning the rest of the Romero family members repeatedly, police didn't seem to learn anything of significance. By July 16th, it had been about 5 weeks since Robbie disappeared. And on this night, there was the most activity since Robbie disappeared. Officers monitoring the Belmont residence on July 16th noticed Ronnie and an unidentified female entering and exiting the residence repeatedly throughout the evening. Then, just when they thought the activity had calmed down, Ronnie called 911 to claim his girlfriend, a different female, was responsible for and had confessed to him her responsibility for Robbie's death. He said, "My girlfriend is in the house, and she just confessed to me that she ran over my brother. I want you to go in there and arrest her." Ronnie seemed to have detailed knowledge of what his girlfriend supposedly did that evening. He gave police graphic descriptions of Robbie's alleged injuries, those of which were never shared with the public. He claimed that she had accidentally hit Robbie with her car the evening he disappeared, put him in the car with her, and drove around for a while, not knowing what to do with him. Supposedly, during that car ride, Robbie succumbed to his injuries and died. So, panicking, the woman supposedly put Robbie in a dumpster. Upon entering the residence that evening, police had trouble waking the woman, who seemed bewildered, and she did not appear to have any idea what Ronnie and the police were talking about. Ultimately, police determined that, while they suspect she definitely knows more than she shared, she was not responsible for Robbie's death. Her name was never given to the newspapers, and she never spoke publicly about her involvement in the case. Later that night, police administered polygraph tests to both the unnamed woman and Ronnie. This was Ronnie's second polygraph related to the disappearance. While she passed her polygraph test, Ronnie failed his, as he had with the first. Around this same time, while talking with police, Ronnie made it a point to question police about the time one is required to serve if convicted of manslaughter, the act of killing without malice. They actually got to the point where investigators had the statute book out, open in front of them, and they were convinced that they were on the verge of discovering the location of Robbie's body. But a lawyer soon arrived and told Ronnie to stop talking to the police. And he did. Evelyn, desperate to explore any clues, hired a psychic, who prompted a new search in November 2000 in the mountainous mining village of Cerrillos, New Mexico, about 40 minutes outside of Santa Fe. This search would also be fruitless. Later that month, on Thanksgiving, Lieutenant Archuleta was demoted. This ultimately causes the Romero family to file a lawsuit against the Santa Fe Police Department. They feel like the initial mishandling of Robbie's disappearance may have cost him his life. Shortly after this lawsuit is filed in early June of 2002, the department decides to fire Archuleta. Before Robbie's father, Rudy Sr., was able to see the result of this lawsuit, he died in October of 2002. The family says that he was sick, but also that he drank more than he should have since Robbie's disappearance, because it was simply too much for him. Toward the end of 2003, Evelyn tried to obtain the case file on Robbie. She was denied by the courts for almost a year before they would release certain pieces of their case file. Sometime in 2005, the Romero family claimed in a lawsuit that police were harassing them. Community members wrote into the newspapers expressing their support for the family. However, the grand jury ultimately ruled in favor of the police department. Things got very quiet until 2006, when Ronnie made his infamous disturbing comment to police. In early January of 2006, the family was preparing to testify in front of the grand jury when Ronnie was arrested for a probation violation. Ronnie got officers' attention that day because he mentioned his brother and told officers, "You know what I want." He offered to give police information regarding Robbie's disappearance if they gave him a deal. When district attorneys arrived, they fought back and forth with Ronnie, saying they wouldn't give him a deal if he didn't give them information. And Ronnie wasn't going to give them information without a deal first. He became frustrated and belligerent, and the opportunity was lost. He refused to cooperate further. During this time, though, it's important to note something specific Ronnie told police officers. When referencing his brother, he claimed Robbie was 60 feet deep. Not 6, 60. That stuck with police, who chose to, for the third time, search the landfill. This time in the cold of winter, rather than the sweltering heat. Other comments Ronnie made were also suspect, such as claiming he got up early the morning Robbie disappeared to take him to play football at the park. However, police remember that Ronnie was actually out in the early hours of that morning and remained sleeping hungover into the late hours of June 7th. Either way, Ronnie still wasn't telling police everything. On September 21st, 2008, Ronnie died in jail under suspicious circumstances. He was back in for yet another probation violation. This time, law enforcement considered him to be out of chances. The Romero family had lost so much already, but Evelyn had not lost hope that Robbie would still be found. But despite the prime person of interest being deceased, no one came forward with any new information. And then a few years later, in 2011, the news broke that police were speaking with a man who could be Robbie. This time, they were testing the DNA of a man that the Romero siblings had introduced to Evelyn. Robert Terrazas, also known as Robbie, bore a striking resemblance to Robbie Romero. Even Evelyn thought so. What fit too was the fact that Robert claimed not to have memory of his childhood, and had been living outside of Santa Fe until recently. The headlines to this day make it seem like Mr. Terrazas was claiming to be Robbie, which he never did. Ultimately, the DNA showed that Robert was not Robbie, and furthermore, his mother, who remembers birthing him herself, claimed that Robert had recently suffered a head injury, which may explain the early childhood memory loss. Again, after the stress of a new possible lead had come and gone, Evelyn and her remaining family members were left with no more information and no closer to finding Robbie. It's now 2019. Robbie has been gone for 19 years to the day. Police maintain that while they were just doing their jobs and never intended to target Ronnie, they were convinced he knew more than he told them. They never had any evidence outside of the testimony that linked Ronnie to Robbie's disappearance, and despite his strange comments throughout the years, Ronnie maintained he had no participation nor knowledge of Robbie's disappearance. Evelyn is sure that if anyone in Santa Fe knows anything, they would have come forward by now. Evelyn has remained living in the Bellamont residence from which Robbie originally disappeared, and she has never changed her phone number, both in the case that Robbie finds his way home someday. Robbie's face was originally shown on America's Most Wanted and Maury, and police had released a few videos which included footage of Robbie in the years before his disappearance. Credible community members claimed in the years following the disappearance they heard police talking in hushed voices, saying they had indeed found Robbie's body and were simply waiting for a confession from Ronnie. But if that were true, why, after all these years, do we still know nothing? Now, the only traces of Robbie are old hard copies of newspapers, digital articles from the false alarm with Mr. Terrazas, and a few threads on Reddit Unsolved and another obscure mystery cases website. The world has forgotten, but Robbie's community has not. If, after watching this video, you feel you may have some insight, or if you happen to know anything about what happened 19 years ago today, you can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously or the Santa Fe Police Department non-emergency dispatch line.